So it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Bob Blackman, who's an MP, Member of Parliament in the British Parliament. And I'm interested to hear your perspective on this.
Well, thank you. And it's great to join this distinguished panel. And I think if we put the history over the last 40 years of European and American policy into a series of phases, that since the Shah was deposed and the theocratic regime came into operation in Iran, in the 1980s, we all said Iran and Iraq can fight each other and that balances each other out. Then we invaded Iraq and destroyed the Iraqi regime, and then Iran became the dominant force in the region. Then we got fear. They became the dominant force and they would acquire nuclear weapons. So sanctions were employed. When the sanctions were employed, they were at the point of breaking the regime. But what did we do? We set up the JCPOA and we took away the sanctions and we allowed breathing space for the mullahs to continue. Now, that problem with that is that all it did, as was quite rightly said by others, is delay the production of nuclear weapons. Iran now has ballistic weapons that can literally launch missiles accurately 3,000 miles. And if they get nuclear weapons, they are a threat to the entirety of the West as well as the rest of the region. So that is the geographic view and geopolitical view of what is going on. We also know that the theocratic regime will do everything to suppress their people. And unfortunately, we have followed a policy of appeasement against these people for far too long. And if you deal with these people, they will just say, just give, give, give. They will take more and more and more. So our policy must now be one of saying no to a further JCPOA, absolute sanctions against the regime to force them to give up their threat of nuclear weapons and against the oppression of their own people. So there must be no further JCPOA, and there are rumours that that may be on the cards for this autumn, which, as someone who opposed it in the beginning, I think would be a dreadful mistake by the West in its entirety. Then we look at the brave people of Iran who have stood up in the face of dictatorship, brutal dictatorship, when they demonstrate, when they ask and demand the right to democracy, the right to wear the clothes that they wish to wear, to operate as we do in the West. They are brutally oppressed. So we must be saluting those brave people. We can speak freely here, but those people are under threat every single day of their lives. We must remember that the president there is a brutal man that sent 30,000 people to their deaths back in 1988. This is not someone who will listen to reason. He's not a reasonable man. He is a brutal dictator. So we must know that we don't deal with that by appeasement. And now we're experiencing what that dictatorship is trying to do. Quite rightly, you referred to the victory in the courts here when the Iranian dictatorship tried, through their diplomatic means, to ban the rally of the NCRI here. Well, freedom and democracy triumphs, and the rally will take place tomorrow. We should also remember that in 2018, when we gathered for our rally here, the terrorist plot that was launched in order to blow up Madam Rajavi and all the members of the conference. Now, I was here. I was one of those people. I take that sort of attack personally. And despite the fact of we didn't know it was going on at the time, it was the intelligence operations between France and Belgium that managed to detect and prevent it happening. But we must remember, this was an Iranian diplomat who smuggled the bomb in a diplomatic pouch and then sought to give it over to two terrorists to plant it here in Paris. So can we trust the Iranian diplomats in what they're carrying in their diplomatic pouches any longer? That is a complete breach of what has been the international order. So we cannot allow them to continue. So we must now think of what the alternatives are. So the first alternative has to be that we must prescribe the IRGC in its entirety, seize their assets, and use them for the benefit of the Iranian people. I'm very proud to say that I proposed the motion in the British House of Commons, which was passed unanimously, jointly by every single political party, calling for this to happen. I'm afraid I can't yet convince the government of the United Kingdom to do what we need to do, but we must continue to do that, because what that does is send the strongest possible signal to the people of Iran and the theocratic regime that we are behind you. Now, this would be a big shake-up, and I think we all have to understand that. But we need to do it jointly. We need Western governments to do the same thing across the piece, so that it becomes a sanctions regime that really does bite. And I don't mean biting the Iranian people. What I do mean is biting the theocratic regime that is oppressing them right now. So by not only naming them and shaming them, by seizing their assets and making sure they no longer profit from their crimes against humanity. Then after that, we must not be deflected by the concept of the son of the Shah and other people coming around suddenly thinking they can go back to the reign of the Shah again. We cannot go back there because that failed in the first place. What we must do, as has quite rightly been pointed out, is implement the 10-point democratic plan that Madam Rajavi and the NCRI support. And you know, the most important point on that, we can go through everyone, I agree with every one of the 10 points, I think we all would. The most important point of that is that there to be an interim government and that after 6 months there will be free and fair elections and the people of Iran then will choose who they want as their leadership. That is what we all have in democracies. We cannot have a position whereby you go from a dictatorship to another dictatorship. You can't go from a dictatorship to a democracy straight away. What you do need to do is have an interim arrangement so that then the people can make up their minds as to who they want to lead them. Now, I hope they'll make a wise choice and that the NCRI and Madam Rajavi will serve the people of Iran in the way that they are setting out. I hope they will make that choice, but it is a choice for the people of Iran, not for us to dictate to them. So together, this sets a set of proposals, I suggest, that we could all agree on, we could all implement, and we could all take forward. But until we do that, we are going to be in this long position of people demonstrating, putting their lives on the line, and nothing happening. And I end by the issue of Ukraine. Now, in Ukraine, the Russians are using drones and other sophisticated weaponry that is supplied by Iran. Yep. Now, I have to say, there is extremely credible evidence that much of that technology has come from British universities and other universities in Europe, supplied to Iran for them to develop these weapons and then for them to use them against the brave people of Ukraine, when we are supporting the brave people of Ukraine in their fight against the Russians. This is a scandal that must be exposed. We cannot allow a position whereby our technology is being used against people that we seek to support and defend. And we must put a stop to it right now so that there is not a position there is not a position not only about the brave people of Ukraine, but the brave people of Iran who may be suppressed by weapons and weaponry that we have provided from the West. That is a scandal. It must be exposed, and we must bring it home to roost. And the final thing I just say before we go back to across the discussion is let us hope that by putting the pressure on that Ukraine will win that war quickly and the Russians will be defeated quickly. They'll be defeated in the end. It's a question of how long, but a quick defeat. And then we can destabilize the regime in Tehran and have a position where freedom and democracy will prevail. When that happens, we can all go and hold the conference in Tehran of a free Iran.